The obsidian spires of the ossuary academy pierced the crimson sky like black daggers thrust through bleeding flesh. 7 distinct gravitational fields hummed in perfect discord across the training grounds, each one calibrated to crush the unwary and forge the exceptional. This was where deathworld sent their finest warriors, forged in crucibles that would reduce lesser beings to constituent atoms. Lieutenant Commander Hadrian Cross adjusted his breathing apparatus and felt the familiar weight of Earth's relentless training settle across his shoulders like an old friend returning from distant wars. 23 years as a Navy SEAL had carved lessons into his bones that no academy simulation could replicate. The scar tissue across his ribs whispered stories of Kandahar firefights. The calluses on his trigger finger remembered midnight extractions from hostile waters, where one mistake meant becoming fish food. His left shoulder carried shrapnel from a building collapse in Mosul, and his right ankle bore the permanent reminder of a parachute malfunction over the South China Sea. But it was the invisible scars that made him dangerous. The ones etched into his tactical consciousness by missions where everything went wrong, and survival demanded solutions that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional military doctrine. Earth had spent 2 decades trying to kill him through every conceivable method of violent death. He had learned to turn each attempt into tactical knowledge. Around him, 6 other beings stood in formation, each representing the most lethal warriors their respective galaxies could produce. Each one a living weapons system forged by worlds that made survival an art form. The Academy's ancient neural interface crackled to life, its synthetic voice echoing across the assembly grounds with the weight of countless tournaments past. Attention, candidates. The Tri-Galaxy Championship begins in 30 seconds. Only one will claim the title of Supreme Deathworld Operative. The air itself felt electric with barely contained violence. Hadrian's enhanced senses cataloged his competition through micro-movements and involuntary tells that revealed more than any intelligence briefing ever could. 23 years of reading enemy combatants in split-second life-or-death decisions had taught him that the most dangerous opponents were often the quietest ones. The being to his left shifted weight with a sound like grinding crystal. When their eyes met, Hadrian felt a low harmonic vibration resonate through his chest cavity. The creature's translucent skin revealed internal structures that pulsed with seismic rhythm. And when it flexed, hairline fractures appeared in the Academy's reinforced flooring. The intelligence reports had called this one Zethkar, but numbers on a page couldn't capture the unsettling way reality seemed to bend around its presence. Every breath it took created micro-tremors that Hadrian felt in his bones. 7 feet of predatory grace moved with liquid precision behind Zethkar. Silexandra's chitinous armor caught the Academy's artificial lighting and transformed it into patterns that hurt to look at directly. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed in sequences that made Hadrian's tactical instincts scream warnings. She was beautiful. She was also absolutely terrifying. When she turned her head to observe the other contestants, the movement was too fast for human eyes to track smoothly. Air displacement from her casual gesture created pressure waves that ruffled Hadrian's hair 3 meters away. Behind them, something massive breathed with the rhythm of industrial machinery. Morthane's scarred hide told stories of battles against things that shouldn't exist, each mark a testament to surviving encounters with living plasma. When he shifted position, the metallic taste of ozone filled the air, and Hadrian's radiation detector registered brief spikes that would have been lethal to unprotected humans. The hulking warrior noticed Hadrian's attention and offered what might have been a smile. It revealed teeth that glowed with residual energy, and when he spoke, his voice carried the crackling undertone of contained lightning. Interesting. The human measures us through observation rather than direct challenge. Hadrian's tactical assessment was interrupted by a sensation he'd never experienced before: gravity becoming negotiable. Nyxalith hovered above the formation, her presence turning local physics into polite suggestions rather than immutable laws. When she gestured, the Academy's artificial gravity field developed eddies and currents that made Hadrian's inner ear revolt against impossible sensations. She was studying them all with the detached interest of a physicist examining interesting variables. And when her attention focused on Hadrian, he felt spacetime compress around him like invisible hands. Your species evolved under remarkably consistent gravitational parameters. How limiting. Her voice carried harmonics that existed in dimensions human ears weren't designed to process, creating phantom sounds that echoed inside his skull. The acrid scent of industrial chemicals announced Vosharak's presence before visual confirmation. The Drakmor warrior's respiratory system processed the Academy's filtered atmosphere and exhaled toxins that would have been lethal to most organic life. When he moved, corrosive compounds leached from his skin, leaving molecular-thin etches in the Academy's treated flooring. But it was his eyes that revealed the true depth of his lethality. They held the cold calculation of someone who had turned poison into an art form, who understood that victory often came through making the battlefield itself hostile to enemy survival. Chemical warfare becomes unnecessary when your existence is chemical warfare, he observed, his voice carrying the harsh undertones of atmospheric acids. The final contestant existed in a state of quantum uncertainty that made direct observation problematic. Thane Solaris flickered between dimensional phases like a living hologram losing signal strength, occasionally manifesting as multiple overlapping images before collapsing back into singular focus. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from several locations simultaneously, creating acoustic interference patterns that made normal conversation feel surreal. Fascinating. You all assume linear causality governs combat outcomes. Hadrian processed this information with the cold efficiency that had kept his SEAL teams alive through impossible odds. Each warrior represented evolutionary perfection through violence, their respective deathworlds having stripped away every weakness over countless generations of survival. But as he studied their unconscious displays of power, a grim smile played across his scarred features. They were all showing off, demonstrating their capabilities like alpha predators, establishing dominance hierarchies. Earth had taught him something these evolutionary marvels had never learned. The most dangerous predator was the one that looked harmless until it was too late to matter. The Academy's neural interface crackled to life, but Hadrian was already moving, his tactical mind shifting into the cold, analytical state that had made him legendary among special operations communities. Time to show these alien deathworld warriors what 43 years of survival training on humanity's deathworld had really taught him about the art of staying alive when everything wanted you dead. 7 warriors, 7 deathworlds, one championship that would reshape the balance of galactic military doctrine. The neural interface pulsed once more. Phase 1 commences now. Survive the convergence chamber. The ground beneath their feet dissolved. Hadrian's SEAL training kicked in with ruthless efficiency as he plummeted through a shaft that defied geometric logic. The walls shifted between liquid mercury and crystallized vacuum, while gravity rotated through impossible angles every few seconds. This wasn't a test of strength or speed. It was pure adaptation under pressure. He spread his arms and legs, using his body as a control surface while his mind calculated vectors and impact probabilities. Around him, his competitors deployed their respective homeworld advantages. Zethkar resonated his crystalline form to match the shaft's frequency, riding the harmonic vibrations like a controlled avalanche. Alexandra used her atmospheric training to navigate the pressure differentials with fluid grace. But Hadrian had something they didn't. Earth had tried to kill him in every conceivable way for over 2 decades. Ocean depths that would implode submarines. Arctic conditions that turned blood to slush. Desert heat that cooked the moisture from living tissue. Jungle environments where every plant and animal competed to add his bones to the forest floor. This was just Tuesday on a bad deployment. He twisted mid-fall, using the shaft's rotating gravity to slingshot toward what his tactical instincts identified as the most stable exit vector. The other contestants were fighting the chamber's physics. He was dancing with them. Hadrian hit the landing zone in a perfect combat roll, weapons systems already online and targeting solutions calculated before his feet touched solid ground. The convergence chamber had deposited all 7 contestants in a spherical arena that measured roughly 200 meters in diameter. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that his enhanced optics immediately recognized as a countdown sequence. 60 seconds until Phase 2 initiation. Vosharak landed with seismic impact, his dense bone structure turning the platform beneath him into a crater of fractured metal. Impressive, but it also telegraphed his position to every hostile sensor in the arena. Rookie mistake for a warrior of his supposed caliber. Nyxilith simply appeared in her designated position, having manipulated local spacetime to bypass the landing sequence entirely. She regarded the other contestants with what passed for amusement among her species. Foolish, you still think in terms of physical limitations. Hadrian checked his gear loadout and smiled grimly. Let me introduce you to some human limitations. The countdown reached 0, and the arena floor transformed into a tactical maze that would have challenged a supercomputer. Corridors shifted every 15 seconds, creating new sight lines and eliminating cover with mechanical precision. Weapons platforms emerged from hidden alcoves, their targeting systems calibrated to recognize and exploit each species' documented weaknesses. This was where deathworld training separated the survivors from the legends. Alexandra moved like liquid mercury through the maze, her gas giant reflexes allowing her to navigate the shifting corridors with inhuman grace. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed to avoid detection, while specialized organs analyzed atmospheric composition for trace chemical signatures of her competitors. Zethkar turned the maze against itself, using his seismic abilities to collapse sections of the structure and create new pathways through pure kinetic force. The Academy's architects had built the arena to withstand normal combat stresses, but they hadn't accounted for a warrior who could focus tectonic plate movements through his skeletal system. Morthane took the direct approach. When weapons platforms emerged to engage him, he simply absorbed their energy output and redirected it as concentrated plasma bursts that carved new corridors through the maze walls. His Zarathi physiology treated military-grade energy weapons like a supplement to his existing power reserves. But Hadrian moved through the maze like a ghost. 23 years of SEAL operations had taught him that the most dangerous weapon was the one your enemy never saw coming. He used the Academy's own shifting geometry to mask his approach vectors, while his tactical systems identified patterns in the maze's reconstruction sequence that the other contestants had missed. The Academy wasn't just testing their combat skills. It was analyzing their strategic thinking under pressure. He reached the maze's central objective point first, securing the tactical advantage while his competitors were still fighting the environment instead of understanding it. The objective turned out to be a sophisticated holographic projector that displayed a real-time tactical situation requiring immediate resolution. 7 hostile cruisers approaching a civilian colony. Standard defensive platforms offline. Available assets one damaged frigate, and 6 fighter squadrons with mixed experience levels. Time to impact, 14 minutes. Hadrian's mind shifted into command mode. This was the kind of impossible tactical situation that SEAL teams trained for every day. Not enough resources, not enough time, and everything depending on decisions made under maximum pressure. The other contestants materialized around the holographic display like predators drawn to the scent of tactical complexity. Each arrival carried the weight of their homeworld's approach to warfare. 7 different philosophies that had been forged through millennia of survival under conditions that would have reduced lesser species to evolutionary footnotes. But now, standing before a scenario that demanded not just individual excellence, but strategic leadership, they were about to reveal something far more dangerous than their combat capabilities. They were about to reveal how they thought. Alexandra studied the tactical display through specialized organs that processed information in patterns too complex for most species to comprehend. Her bioluminescent markings shifted into configurations that spoke of gas giant storm navigation, where survival required coordinating multiple elements through atmospheric conditions that changed faster than thought itself. The Velnari approach to this scenario would emphasize distributed intelligence and swarm tactics, turn the civilian evacuation ships into coordinated strike elements, use their collective consciousness to create communication networks that function faster than electronic systems. Her voice carried the harmonics of atmospheric pressure changes, creating phantom sounds that resonated in dimensions human hearing wasn't designed to process. But something else flickered across her alien features as she processed the scenario's deeper implications. A recognition that transcended species barriers and spoke to the universal language of tactical analysis. This scenario is designed to analyze our strategic thinking patterns rather than test our military capabilities. Intelligence. She sees it too. Hadrian felt a moment of professional respect for a mind that could process multidimensional tactical scenarios while simultaneously recognizing the Academy's hidden agenda. Alexandra wasn't just a warrior. She was a tactical analyst who understood that information warfare often trumped conventional combat. Zethkar's crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies as he interfaced with the holographic systems, his seismic abilities allowing him to analyze structural weaknesses in enemy ship configurations through vibrational signatures that existed across impossible distances. His solution demonstrated the elegant mathematics of destruction. Identify critical failure points in the hostile fleet's formation, and use concentrated kinetic strikes to create cascade failures that would disable multiple vessels through carefully orchestrated structural collapse. The beauty is in the precision. 7 targeted strikes, 7 disabled vessels, no unnecessary destruction. His voice carried the acoustic properties of controlled avalanches, each word precisely calculated for maximum harmonic impact. Mathematician views warfare as applied physics, probably capable of calculating victory through pure mathematical analysis. Morthane approached the tactical display with the confidence of someone who had learned to see energy as a resource rather than a threat. His specialized organs pulsed with absorbed power as he analyzed the scenario through the lens of energy distribution and resource management. The Zarathi solution was elegantly simple. Convert the colony's industrial infrastructure into energy absorption matrices that could power defensive systems far beyond their original specifications. Turn every fusion reactor into a tactical battery. Transform civilian power grids into military assets. Victory belongs to whoever can harvest and redirect the most energy. The hostile fleet carries impressive firepower, but they cannot match the energy potential of an entire industrial colony. His words crackled with contained lightning, each syllable carrying the harmonic undertones of plasma storms and atmospheric electricity. Power engineer understands that warfare is ultimately about energy management, views every conflict as a resource allocation problem. Nyxilith hovered above the tactical display, her gravitational manipulation abilities creating local distortions that allowed her to process spatial relationships through dimensions that existed beyond conventional physics. Her approach to the scenario transcended normal military thinking entirely. The hostile fleet operates under conventional assumptions about spacetime and strategic positioning, create artificial gravity wells to drag their ships into predetermined locations, generate gravitational lenses to focus defensive weapons into concentrated beams, manipulate local spacetime to make their approach vectors impossible. Her voice reached them through dimensional shortcuts that bypassed normal acoustic transmission, creating harmonics that felt like having mathematical equations whispered directly into their consciousness. Physicist views warfare as applied manipulation of fundamental forces, probably capable of rewriting local physics to ensure victory. Vosharak studied the scenario through chemical analysis that revealed tactical possibilities invisible to other forms of strategic thinking. His Drakmor training had taught him to see every environment as a potential weapon, every atmospheric composition as a tactical advantage waiting to be exploited. Evacuate the civilian population and transform the colony's atmosphere into a chemical weapon. Release compounds that will corrode enemy ship hulls and poison their life support systems. Turn their own atmospheric processing against them. His voice carried the harsh undertones of industrial acids and atmospheric toxins, each word precisely calculated to survive in environments that would dissolve most organic compounds. Chemical warfare specialist understands that controlling the environment controls the outcome, views every battlefield as chemistry waiting to be weaponized. Thane Solaris flickered between multiple probability states as he analyzed the scenario from quantum perspectives that allowed him to sample different potential outcomes simultaneously. His approach to tactical planning existed outside normal casuality, where decisions could be made based on understanding multiple futures at once. Phase the entire colony into a parallel dimension where the hostile fleet cannot reach them. Exist in quantum superposition until the threat passes. Select the reality where survival is most probable. His voice seemed to come from several temporal locations simultaneously, creating acoustic interference patterns that made normal conversation feel like an exercise in interdimensional communication. Quantum strategist views warfare as probability management, capable of selecting optimal outcomes from infinite possibilities. Each solution demonstrated tactical brilliance shaped by evolutionary pressures that had forged these warriors through entirely different concepts of survival and victory. But they all shared one critical blind spot that Hadrian's human experience had taught him to recognize. They were all thinking like individuals rather than leaders. Contestant Cross, explain your tactical assessment. The Academy's neural interface carried expectation that resonated through harmonic frequencies, designed to encourage competitive analysis and strategic one-upmanship. But Hadrian was no longer interested in winning the Academy's competition. He was interested in understanding why someone needed detailed tactical assessments from 7 different deathworld military philosophies. And more importantly, he was interested in making sure that information never reached whoever was collecting it. The tactical scenario isn't the real test. The real test is seeing how we think under pressure when we believe lives are at stake. Someone is building a database of deathworld strategic doctrine. His words carried the calm certainty that had made him legendary among special operations communities, the kind of authoritative confidence that could turn desperate situations into tactical advantages through pure force of leadership. But more importantly, they carried something that his competitors had never heard before: the sound of human strategic thinking that existed beyond individual excellence and encompassed something far more dangerous. The sound of someone who understood that the most important battles were often fought in the spaces between conflicts, where information and understanding determined the outcome of wars that hadn't been declared yet. Each competitor's solution has merit, but they're all missing the critical variable. This colony isn't just a target, it's a testing ground. And we're not just contestants. We're intelligence assets being harvested for strategic data by someone who needs to understand exactly how deathworld civilizations think when everything is at stake. The arena dissolved around them in waves of digital dissolution, reality peeling away like layers of crystallized light until only the essential remained. 7 warriors standing in a space that existed between possibilities, breathing air that tasted of ozone and anticipation. When the command bridge materialized, it did so with the weight of inevitability. Hadrian felt the shift in atmospheric pressure as massive systems came online around them, the deck plates thrumming with power that spoke of technologies beyond human engineering. The central command chair rose from surfaces that gleamed like compressed starlight, its neural interface systems casting shadows that danced with barely contained energy. But it was the silence that truly announced the magnitude of what they faced. The kind of silence that preceded either transcendence or annihilation, heavy with the breath of 7 civilizations watching their finest representatives prepare to command actual war. The holographic displays ignited like stars being born in accelerated time, revealing a tactical nightmare painted in the harsh colors of desperation. Human colonial forces scattered across impossible distances, their defensive platforms flickering like dying candles against the darkness of superior enemy numbers. Evacuation ships moved through space with the desperate urgency of prey fleeing predators, their hulls packed with families who had never imagined that home could become a battlefield. Real-time tactical command, actual military engagement, failure measured in lives lost rather than points scored. Silexandra approached the command chair first, but her movement carried none of the fluid confidence Hadrian had observed during the earlier challenges. Something profound had shifted in the dynamic between them all, a recognition that transcended species boundaries and touched the fundamental nature of what it meant to be responsible for others' survival. When she settled into the neural interface, her bioluminescent markings dimmed to patterns Hadrian had never seen before. Vulnerability masked by necessity. Fear transformed into focus through the alchemy that turned ordinary beings into leaders when everything depended on their decisions. The colonial fleet began moving under her guidance like schools of fish, responding to invisible currents, their formations shifting through 3-dimensional space with the organic precision that spoke of gas giant evolutionary heritage. She didn't command the human forces so much as conduct them, turning chaos into harmony through distributed intelligence networks that functioned faster than electronic thought. Hadrian watched enemy targeting systems struggle to lock onto vessels that moved in patterns too complex for conventional prediction algorithms. Civilian evacuation, ships became elements in tactical symphonies that confused hostile sensors, while military assets concentrated for surgical strikes against enemy command vessels. The results spoke through mathematics that carried emotional weight. 30% casualty reduction among civilian populations, while maintaining tactical initiative against odds that should have guaranteed annihilation. But when Silexandra rose from the command chair, her alien features carried an expression that needed no translation across species barriers. It wasn't enough. Zethkar's crystalline form caught the command bridge's artificial lighting and transformed it into patterns that hurt to observe directly, prismatic refractions that spoke of homeworld experiences beyond human comprehension. When he interfaced with the tactical systems, the entire bridge began resonating with harmonic frequencies that Hadrian felt in his chest cavity. The enemy fleet's formations revealed their secrets to analysis that existed beyond conventional sensor capabilities. Hull stress patterns became musical notations. Structural weaknesses sang their own vulnerabilities through harmonic frequencies that traveled across impossible distances at the speed of mathematics itself. Under Zethkar's coordination, weapons fire became precision instruments, creating cascade failures that propagated through enemy ship systems like perfectly orchestrated avalanches. Vessels disabled rather than destroyed, their crews surviving encounters that could have been massacres. Their ships preserved for intelligence value, while civilian populations escaped through corridors carved from chaos by acoustic precision. 45% casualty reduction. Victory through applied physics rather than brute force destruction. When the crystalline warrior relinquished command, his harmonic emissions carried undertones that spoke of professional frustration mixed with growing respect for the complexity of cooperative warfare. Still not enough. Morthane's massive frame settled into the command chair with surprising gentleness, his energy absorption organs pulsing with absorbed power as neural interfaces established connections that transcended normal human-machine interaction protocols. The bridge's power systems responded to his presence like instruments recognizing a master musician. Energy distribution networks reorganizing themselves into configurations that existed beyond their original design parameters. Hadrian watched in fascination as the hulking warrior transformed the colonial fleet into something unprecedented. A distributed power grid where every ship became both generator and weapon. Energy flowing between vessels through coordination that turned individual capabilities into collective force multipliers. Enemy weapons fire became additional ammunition for human offensive systems. Industrial infrastructure converted into tactical batteries that powered defensive screens far beyond manufacturer specifications. The entire engagement transformed from traditional combat into resource management on scales that challenged computational capability. 51% casualty reduction. Enemy fleet overwhelmed by their own redirected firepower through energy distribution that rewrote the fundamental economics of space warfare. But when Morthane rose from the command position, electrical discharges playing across his scarred hide spoke of tactical frustration that transcended species barriers. Not enough. Still not enough. Nyxalith's approach to the command chair involved no physical movement at all. She simply existed there, having manipulated local space-time to relocate herself through dimensional shortcuts that made conventional transportation seem primitive. When she interfaced with the tactical systems, gravity itself became negotiable around the command bridge. Under her guidance, the battlefield transformed into something that challenged enemy comprehension of physical law itself. Artificial gravity wells dragged hostile vessels into predetermined kill zones, while gravitational lenses focused defensive energy weapons into concentrated beams that carved through enemy formations like photons through vacuum. The human colonial forces began moving through space-time corridors that shouldn't have existed, appearing in tactical positions that violated enemy understanding of strategic geometry, while civilian evacuation proceeded through dimensional shortcuts that reduced transit times to mathematical abstractions. 58% casualty reduction. Enemy fleet neutralized through physics manipulation that made their conventional tactics meaningless against forces that existed outside normal space-time limitations. When Nyxilith's attention withdrew from the command systems, gravitational distortions around her carried harmonics that spoke of dissatisfaction despite unprecedented tactical success. Insufficient. The mathematics of victory required variables they hadn't yet identified. Vossarak's approach to command demonstrated how chemical warfare philosophy translated to electronic battlefield management. His respiratory system processed the command bridge's atmosphere and exhaled compounds that interfaced with information systems through molecular-level interactions that existed beyond conventional human-machine protocols. Under his coordination, enemy fleet networks became vectors for systematic degradation that spread through their communications like biological infections designed at the quantum level. Targeting data became poisoned. Defensive systems turned against their operators. Electronic warfare campaigns that transformed enemy advantages into systemic vulnerabilities through information toxins that multiplied across their entire tactical grid. 62% casualty reduction. Enemy fleet defeated through corrupted information systems that turned their own technological sophistication into weapons directed against their survival. But when the Drakmor warrior relinquished command, the acids that leaked from his scarred hide created etch patterns in the deck plating that spoke of tactical frustration, despite revolutionary innovation, still insufficient for optimal outcomes. Thane Solaris approached the final command sequence through quantum uncertainty that made direct observation problematic. His consciousness existed in multiple probability states simultaneously, analyzing potential outcomes across parallel realities while coordinating tactical responses that existed outside normal causality. The enemy fleet found themselves engaging forces that attacked from directions that shouldn't have existed. Their strategic planning rendered meaningless by opponents who could sample multiple futures and select optimal approaches from infinite possibility matrices. Quantum manipulation transformed conventional space warfare into probability management, where victory belonged to whoever could navigate uncertainty with greatest precision. 67% casualty reduction. Enemy forces defeated through dimensional manipulation that made their tactical doctrine irrelevant against opponents who existed in multiple realities simultaneously. When quantum uncertainty collapsed Thane Solaris back into singular focus, his dimensional emanations carried frequencies that spoke of tactical achievement, shadowed by recognition of fundamental limitations. Even quantum manipulation couldn't transcend the essential problem they all faced. Individual excellence, no matter how refined, could only achieve individual solutions. Lieutenant Commander Cross. Final assessment. Hadrian approached the command chair through silence that had weight, carrying the accumulated recognition of 6 civilizations who had pushed their tactical capabilities to evolutionary limits, and discovered those limits weren't sufficient for optimal outcomes. But as he settled into the neural interface systems, his enhanced tactical consciousness revealed something his competitors had missed entirely. The enemy fleet configurations weren't random. Their attack patterns matched theoretical designs from classified development programs. The timing of their assault coincided precisely with the Academy's tournament schedule. This wasn't just tactical assessment. This was intelligence harvesting, designed to analyze deathworld military capabilities through observation of individual performance under controlled stress conditions. But if the Academy wanted to understand how humans approached impossible tactical scenarios, he would demonstrate something unprecedented: how human strategic thinking could coordinate multiple deathworld capabilities into collective victory that transcended individual limitations entirely. His fingers found the communication controls that connected him directly to warriors who had become something more than competitors through shared recognition of inadequate solutions. Alexandra, your distributed intelligence can coordinate civilian evacuation more efficiently than any electronic system. Coordinate 800,000 colonists into tactical early warning networks while maintaining evacuation priorities. Zethkar, your harmonic analysis can identify structural vulnerabilities across the entire enemy fleet simultaneously. Find critical failure points for systematic fleet neutralization with minimum casualties. Morthane, your energy coordination can transform our entire fleet into distributed weapons platforms. Coordinate power distribution while building energy reserves for decisive engagement. Nyxilith, your gravitational manipulation controls battlefield geometry itself. Create tactical advantages that exist outside enemy comprehension while maintaining civilian escape corridors. Vosharak, your information warfare can corrupt their coordination while preserving intelligence value. Turn their networks against them while capturing rather than destroying. Thane Solaris, your quantum manipulation creates tactical opportunities across multiple probability states. Coordinate our combined assault through dimensional vectors they cannot predict. The silence that followed carried recognition from 6 different evolutionary lineages. Tactical thinking that operated beyond anything their respective civilizations had developed through millions of years of warfare optimization. You propose coordination rather than competition. Alexandra's bioluminescent markings shifted into patterns that spoke of analytical fascination, mixed with profound respect for strategic innovation that transcended traditional military doctrine. Exactly, individual excellence can achieve individual solutions. But humans learned something different through deathworld survival that challenged us every day for millions of years. Hadrian's enhanced systems began integrating their combined capabilities into strategic frameworks that turned 7 different evolutionary advantages into unified military doctrine that existed beyond anything the galaxy had previously witnessed. We learned that the most dangerous weapon isn't individual superiority. The most dangerous weapon is collective excellence, coordinated through leadership that understands how to transform diversity into tactical multiplication rather than competitive liability. Under his coordination, the impossible tactical scenario became demonstration of cooperative warfare that combined the finest military capabilities 7 different deathworlds could produce, orchestrated through human strategic thinking that had learned to turn disadvantages into decisive advantages through collective action. The results exceeded every performance metric the Academy's systems had recorded across thousands of tournaments designed to identify optimal military capabilities. Casualty reduction, 93%. Mission completion time, 8 minutes, 47 seconds. Strategic innovation, unprecedented coordination of multiple deathworld military doctrines through adaptive leadership protocols. Enemy fleet neutralized through coordinated multi-spectrum assault that preserved vessels for intelligence gathering, while protecting civilian populations through systematic evacuation, coordinated by 800,000 colonists functioning as distributed tactical assets. The silence that followed carried the weight of 7 civilizations recognizing that they had participated in creating something unprecedented. Proof that deathworld capabilities could be coordinated into collective victory through leadership that understood diversity as tactical advantage rather than competitive obstacle. Tournament completion acknowledged. Final evaluation protocols initiated. But as the command bridge dissolved around them, returning 7 warriors to the Academy's original assembly grounds where their journey had begun, Hadrian realized the most important battle was just beginning. They were no longer representatives of individual civilizations competing for supremacy. They had become something far more dangerous. Proof that deathworld warriors could learn to fight as coordinated force rather than isolated legends. The Academy's ancient systems processed data that would reshape understanding of military potential across 3 galaxies. But the real question remained. Who would control that understanding when the Academy's true masters finally revealed their intentions? Standing beneath obsidian spires that pierced crimson sky like weapons pointed at targets, they were only beginning to comprehend. 7 beings who had entered as competitors prepared to leave as something unprecedented, a template for interspecies military cooperation that could redefine the balance of power across the known galaxy. Not because they were stronger or faster or more technologically advanced than their individual capabilities suggested, but because they were human, and humans never surrendered. Phase 2 completion acknowledged, initiating final assessment protocol. The arena dissolved around them like a holographic projection losing power, replaced by a command bridge that would serve as their testing ground for the championship's ultimate challenge. Real-time tactical command of an actual military engagement that was unfolding in a contested star system 300 light-years away, where actual ships with actual crews were fighting and dying, while the Academy's contestants prepared to determine their fate. The command bridge materialized around them with perfect fidelity. Every control surface and display screen functioning exactly as it would aboard a frontline warship. The central command chair sat elevated above tactical stations that could coordinate fleet movements across light-years of space. Multiple holographic displays showed the developing battle from dozens of different perspectives. Fleet movements, individual ship status, weapons tracking, damage reports, and casualty figures that climbed with every passing second. 7 contestants. 1 command chair. Winner takes control of a real military engagement where failure meant actual death for thousands of people. Hadrian felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settle across his shoulders as he studied the strategic situation with the kind of focused intensity that had kept his SEAL teams alive through missions where everything went wrong simultaneously. This was what decades of special operations training had really prepared him for, not just personal combat excellence, but the ability to coordinate complex operations under maximum pressure, while lives hung in the balance. The tactical situation displayed across the holographic interfaces was a nightmare scenario that would have challenged experienced fleet commanders. A 3-way engagement between human colonial forces, Cathara raiders, and an unknown third faction that appeared to be using advanced stealth technology. The human forces were outnumbered 3-1. Their defensive platforms were failing under concentrated fire, and evacuation ships packed with civilians were trying to escape through a blockade that tightened with every passing minute. But the real complexity lay in the political implications. This wasn't just a military engagement. It was a test of interspecies relations that could determine whether the human colonies remained independent or fell under the control of more powerful galactic civilizations. Every tactical decision would send ripples through diplomatic channels that stretched across multiple star systems. The other contestants represented the finest warriors their respective deathworlds could produce, each one a living weapons system perfected through evolutionary pressure and specialized training. But war wasn't about individual excellence anymore. Modern space combat was about turning individual capabilities into collective victory through leadership that understood both the science of tactics and the art of commanding beings who were terrified and desperate and fighting for everything they held dear. Silexandra approached the tactical displays with fluid grace, her gas giant reflexes allowing her to process multiple information streams simultaneously. Her bioluminescent markings shifted into patterns that indicated deep analytical focus as she studied fleet positions and engagement vectors. The Velnari approach to command emphasized distributed intelligence and swarm tactics, coordinating multiple units through chemical signals that functioned faster than electronic communication. Zethkar's crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies as he interfaced with the command systems. His seismic abilities allowing him to sense structural weaknesses in enemy ship configurations through vibrational analysis. His tactical philosophy centered on identifying critical failure points and focusing overwhelming force to create cascade failures that would disable entire enemy formations. Morthane's energy absorption organs allowed him to interface directly with the ship's power systems, giving him unprecedented control over weapons allocation and defensive screening. His Zarathi background had taught him to see combat as energy management, where victory belonged to whoever could absorb more punishment while delivering concentrated force at decisive moments. Nyxalith hovered above the command deck, her gravitational manipulations creating localized distortions that allowed her to process tactical information through spatial relationships rather than conventional displays. Her species viewed battle as physics in motion, where victory required understanding the fundamental forces that governed stellar mechanics and exploiting them through precise manipulation of spacetime. Vosharak's chemical warfare expertise translated perfectly to electronic warfare and information systems security. His Drakmor training had taught him to identify vulnerabilities and exploit them through systematic degradation of enemy capabilities. He could poison information networks the same way his homeworld's atmosphere poisoned unprotected visitors. Thane Solaris flickered between dimensional phases as he studied the tactical situation from multiple quantum perspectives simultaneously. His ability to exist in parallel realities gave him access to probability matrices that showed potential outcomes across infinite variations of the current engagement. Each warrior brought unique capabilities that could influence the battle's outcome. But commanding a space fleet required more than tactical excellence or individual abilities. It required understanding the psychological dynamics of beings who were fighting and dying while following orders transmitted across impossible distances. The Academy's neural interface crackled with electronic authority as it prepared to initiate the final test. Contestants will take turns commanding the engagement. Each will have 15 minutes of tactical control. Performance will be evaluated based on strategic outcomes, casualty minimization, and long-term political implications. The command chair waited like a throne carved from the bones of ancient enemies. Silexandra moved first, her bioluminescent markings shifting to command frequencies as she settled into the tactical command position. Her approach emphasized coordinated swarm attacks, using the civilian evacuation ships as decoy targets, while concentrating her military assets for precision strikes against enemy command vessels. Her gas giant training translated perfectly to three-dimensional space combat, where atmospheric thinking allowed for complex multi-vector approaches that confused enemy targeting systems. Under her command, the human fleet began moving in patterns that resembled atmospheric currents, flowing around enemy strongpoints while concentrating force at carefully chosen impact zones. She achieved moderate success, reducing casualties among the civilian population while maintaining tactical initiative against the larger enemy force. Zethkar's turn demonstrated the devastating potential of seismic warfare translated to space combat. He identified resonant frequencies in enemy hull configurations and used concentrated weapons fire to create harmonic failures that propagated through entire ship systems. His crystalline understanding of structural mechanics allowed him to disable enemy vessels without destroying them completely. maximizing strategic value while minimizing the energy expenditure required for victory. Morthane's energy absorption philosophy created defensive formations that turned enemy weapons' fire into additional power for human offensive systems. His Zarathi training allowed him to coordinate power distribution across multiple ships simultaneously, creating energy-sharing networks that made the entire fleet more resilient while concentrating devastating firepower at decisive moments. Nyxalith's gravitational manipulation abilities created tactical advantages that existed outside conventional space combat doctrine. She generated artificial gravity wells that dragged enemy ships into predetermined kill zones, used gravitational lenses to focus energy weapons into concentrated beams of destruction, and created space-time distortions that made human ships effectively invisible to enemy sensors. Vossarak's chemical warfare expertise translated to electronic warfare campaigns that systematically poisoned enemy information systems. He infiltrated their communication networks, corrupted their targeting data, and introduced cascading failures that turned their own defensive systems against them. His approach demonstrated how information warfare could achieve strategic objectives without requiring overwhelming military force. Thane Solaris commanded from multiple quantum perspectives simultaneously, making tactical decisions based on probability matrices that accounted for potential outcomes across parallel realities. His dimensional manipulation abilities allowed him to coordinate attacks that seemed to come from impossible directions, confusing enemy forces and creating tactical opportunities that existed outside normal spacetime. Each contestant demonstrated tactical excellence and strategic innovation that reflected their homeworld training. But the Academy's evaluation systems were measuring more than individual performance. They were analyzing leadership potential, the ability to coordinate complex operations while maintaining focus on strategic objectives that extended beyond immediate military victory. Lieutenant Commander Cross, your turn. Hadrian approached the command chair with the calm confidence that had carried him through 100 impossible missions, where success required solutions that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional military doctrine. This was the moment that 23 years of SEAL operations had prepared him for, not just the ability to fight and survive, but the capacity to lead others through circumstances that would break lesser minds. He settled into the command position and felt the neural interface establish connection with his enhanced tactical systems. The holographic displays suddenly became extensions of his consciousness, showing him the battle from perspectives that revealed patterns his competitors had missed. But more importantly, they showed him the human element that made victory possible, even when everything else suggested inevitable defeat. The Academy's evaluation systems monitored his biometric data as he began analyzing the tactical situation with the kind of focused intensity that turned chaos into opportunity. This was where human military thinking revealed its true advantage. Not just the ability to adapt to impossible circumstances, but the capacity to inspire others to fight beyond their normal limitations when everything depended on collective victory. Time to show these alien deathworld warriors what a human deathworld had really taught him about the art of turning survival into victory. The command chair waited, and with it, the ultimate test of everything that made humans dangerous in a galaxy full of beings who thought they understood the meaning of warfare. Not because they were stronger or faster or more technologically advanced than their competitors, but because they were human, and humans never surrendered.